I learned a lot on the scientific end of things. I mentioned before I was a big fan of a lot of the gurus. And in 2004, when I wrote that book, I was still kind of in that motivational, rah-rah guru type of phase. And it wasn't until like after I sold my first business of significant value when I kind of revisited that material and realized, this really isn't 100% accurate. And then, especially after I got my degree in like I became a social scientist, I started to analyze things a little bit more critically and also draw parallels from psychology. A lot of these motivational gurus are kind of like pseudo psychologists, meaning that they take these psychological concepts, which are true and reliable, but they twist them and manipulate them to be more palatable.
Imagine it's 12 months from now, and you've achieved your major life goals. How does it feel to be in the best shape of your life? To wake up energized, excited about the day? To have great relationships and friends who support you and propel you forward? How does it feel to have an excess of money, to be able to make the choices you want? To be fearless and open to trying new adventures? Imagine being connected to the universe and it providing everything you desire. It's possible over time, and your past does not dictate your future. The only thing holding you back from this vision is you. It's time to take control of our thoughts and use them to our advantage. Welcome to Richer Soul, where we achieve our dreams and bring balance to health, wealth, relationships, time, and spirituality. If you have not had a chance to listen to episodes 1 through 9, I encourage you to go back and listen to the framework behind Richer Soul and how to create the life of your dreams. You can also find all the show notes for this episode at richersoul.com. Hey, it's Rocky. Welcome to Richer Soul. Today's guest is Bo Bennett, who will share how to think critically about living your ultimate life. Today's quote comes from Aristotle. We are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, therefore, is not an act, but a habit. Have you examined what you repeatedly do? Is it intentional and done with thought? Or did your routine just happen to you? We're going to chat about that and more today. We all want to succeed and thrive in our lives, but what does that look like individually? How do we figure out and plan for our personal prosperity? That's what Bo Bennett is going to chat with us about. He's an entrepreneur and a critical thinker. He also has a PhD in positive psychology, and we're going to bring all of that together along with his journey and his experiences to help you do it faster. We're going to continue to chat about our timeless themes about establishing your own vision of what your life is like, how to adapt confidently in an ever-changing world, a little bit on AI. I know there's going to be a ton of takeaways. Let's meet Bo. Welcome to Richer Soul, Bo Bennett. It's great to have you join us today.
Thank you. Good to be here.
I'm excited to learn from you. You've got quite a lot of different areas, and we'll see where we can meander through them all. Before we do that, we always like to start at the beginning. What was it like when you were growing up, and how much did your family and school teach you about money?
We'll just do the school part right away, nothing. So just take that off the table. But family was a big part of it because everyone in my family, my father, my mother, my sister, and my brother were all entrepreneurs. They were all doing their own thing. None of them had like a traditional job. So I grew up at like starting from age 6 in that kind of environment where everybody was doing something. And I really didn't know any other way. To me, that was the only option. If you wanted to make money, you had to come up with an idea. You had to do something. You couldn't like get a job. That was kind of foreign to me. So that's pretty much what I was raised with, and that's the direction I went.
So when you say that, I mean, were there active conversations around that, or was it just because that's what you observed going around and that was just the conversations happening?
Yeah, that's a good question. And if I told you an answer, I'd probably be making it up or recalling a false memory. I don't remember. I don't remember that far back if we actually did talk a lot about it. I know that I did once ask the question, and it was kind of funny. I went over to my friend's house when I was a little kid, and I'm, where's your dad? And well, he's at work. So he's in the basement because my dad had a workshop in the basement, and he's like, no, he's at work. And I had a really tough time grasping that the kid's dad wasn't there. And when I got home, apparently my friend's mother called my mother just because she thought it was really funny and really cute how I could not understand the concept of getting a job and going out to work. So I do remember that story.
So, I mean, it then sounds like you were just watching and that's what you observed and that's how you learned it. As you got older, were there entrepreneurial lessons that they would have with you, or was it just because you kind of started doing it on your own?
I think it was very passive in that I'd be working with my father, helping him out, and I'd observe what he does, how he acts, who he talks to. And like I think he would talk to me a little bit about this is the way you do things, and but it was more job specific rather than the whole concept of being an entrepreneur. The same thing goes with my mom, where I learned a lot about sales from her. She was a salesperson, and my sister and brother. So yeah, it was more passive.
When did you realize you got important lessons on life without really kind of being told that?
Well, there's one element of this whole puzzle that I'm kind of leaving out, and that is listening to gurus like sales and success gurus. And I've been doing that since age 10. I mentioned I worked for my dad. My dad was an inventor and he worked with plastic. So I worked with injection molding machines. So I would just like press a button, I'd take a mold apart, a little plastic piece would come out. So I would do that over and over. It was incredibly monotonous. However, my sister and mother were in real estate and sales. So they had tons of these tapes of like Anthony Robbins, Zig Ziglar, all the classics, Brian Tracy. So I would listen to them and I found them fascinating. I found them motivating. Like, wow, they were just telling stories like, oh, you could do anything and you could be whatever you want to be. The typical guru type of stuff. And as a 10-year-old, I really kind of fell in love with it. So I learned a lot about being an entrepreneur through that kind of material, probably more than anything. And that's kind of what helped me get on the path as well. Help me stay on the path that I was already on.
Did your friends think you were weird?
Yes. Yeah.
How did those conversations go?
Yeah, it depends. It's funny because it at different stages of my childhood and adolescence, I had different reactions from my peers. When I was much younger, I don't think they quite got it because they weren't there yet. Most of them, like they weren't thinking about jobs, thinking about work, or thinking about money. Where at age 10, that's all I was thinking about. So that and the Heather Thomas poster on my wall. Uh, so I think like as I got a little bit older, like maybe age 12, I started doing these little businesses around my neighborhood. And my friends would notice because I'd have a little extra money, but also I'd be hitting them up for whatever I was doing or selling at the time. Like one time I was giving go-kart rides. We had a gas-powered go-kart. I used to cruise my friends up and down the street, let them drive it for like $3. So I made a little money there. So they definitely started seeing like, okay, this kid is a little bit different. I'm not sure how they thought whether it was weird or not, but maybe. And then in adolescence, it was I think I was more admired by the majority of people because in adolescence is when I started having enough money, like more money than they had. They would get like their standard allowance or something, and I'd have a pretty decent amount for a 15, 16-year-old kid. So I think they weren't envious, but at least not my good friends. They were they could definitely appreciate that, and I think that they were fine with it, but they did think I was weird and different. That's okay.
How did school go for you then? Because that would be a total different kind of atmosphere.
There's a funny story about school. In high school, I was running a business. Like I was doing so many different things, like trying everything and seeing what sticks. I mean, the typical entrepreneurial spirit. That's what you do. You just keep on trying and throwing things out there. So one of the things that I found, like at the back of a magazine, was being a distributor of stun guns. So I'm like, okay, this sounds kind of cool. I'll start doing this. So I made some flyers and I copied a whole bunch of flyers at school, and there were some like extras I threw away. Well, apparently the principal got a hold of one of these, and I was called to the office for like allegedly selling a dangerous weapon in school. But I had to explain to them, no, I just use the copying machines here to do everything. Uh, but that was just like that one typical story of me kind of not quite fitting in with the culture of people just learning and playing. I was trying to learn a little play, but also work and make some money. So that was a little bit different.
It's because I know when I was in high school, I was always selling stuff. So I was making a buck. I always had more money than the other kids. And it's funny, one of the teachers actually noticed what I was doing and how I was doing it. And they actually took lessons from me and started doing it themselves. So they were buying stuff and reselling it. And because we had healthy profit margins. You buy something for $20 and you sell it for 40. And this is a long time ago before this current bout of inflation when money had a little bit more.
Well, it's still 100% profit no matter where inflation
It was
is.
100% profit. And so, you always had extra cash, and it wasn't hard to do. It was just giving people what they already wanted. And, now I think of it as I was Five Below before Five Below. And we had stuff even much higher than $5 back then. So it all worked out. But I know for school, I was turned off to the education system because it seemed so, I don't know, worthless in the sense.
Well, yeah, I could certainly address that. I had that same feeling in college. I went to Bryant College, which is a business school. It's now a Bryant University in Rhode Island. And I went with the mindset of I wanted to start my own business. I wasn't sure exactly what I wanted to do, but I always knew like that's exactly what I want to do. I wanted to do my own thing, running my own business. And I was so upset, I think is the best word, when I found that like none of the teachers, none of the classes were even in that area. They weren't talking about like an entrepreneurial class. They weren't talking about the idea of you starting your own thing. It was kind of like a factory to get you ready for the workforce. And that's what I felt. I felt like it was just pushing me in this direction I didn't want to go. Now, I do need to say I went to the school from 1990 to 94, and I know things have changed since then, and especially with the internet and everything. And most schools are really focused. They have entrepreneurial classes, and all the classes are integrated with the idea of you could do something yourself. At least, as my time as a professor, that's kind of what I gathered from the majority of schools and dealing with students and talking with my own kids too. But when I went to Bryant, it was not like that, and that really bothered me. In fact, I even got kicked off campus for starting a business. I had a t-shirt slash advertising specialty business in college, and I was running it through my dorm room. Now I wasn't like selling to students. I was selling to like businesses and organizations, but I was just like my hub was like customers weren't coming in or anything. It was just my computer. I was running the business. But again, this was back in 1990, and it was kind of a foreign idea to the school. And they said, no, you can't do that. You can't run a business from your dorm room. Therefore, you have to leave. And I did. I left after my junior year, after my sophomore year, my junior year, and I lived off campus where I could run the business. But I always found that odd and disturbing that a business school would kick a student off campus for running a business. And again, I wasn't running like a prostitute ring or some kind of drug cartel. I was simply running like an advertising business, and they didn't like that.
I guess they still didn't know who Michael Dell was.
1994, he was, who knows?
He was just cut, right? That would have been the early days of Dell, I would assume, right around that time, because the PC was just starting to get going around that time.
And I remember I bought my PCs back then in school at Service Merchandise, which was like a chain out here that's now defunct, of course. But the name brand, I forgot, but Gateway? It wasn't Dell. It was like some of the really old basic ones. That
Compaq was back then. Gateway, Apple was back then too, because my first one was an Apple II. But
there might have been an IBM. Come to think
IBM was big back then. Yeah, there were so many different things. It's amazing how that came to be. I'm surprised. So your parents still wanted you to go to college and do all of that as entrepreneurial. They weren't just like, hey, go out and start a business. You don't need all of this.
No, my parents were completely indifferent. It was me that wanted to go to college. And in fact, I wouldn't even say that I wanted to. The story about me going to college was funny because I really didn't care. Like all of my friends junior year, they had their schools, their picks. I did nothing. It wasn't until senior year when one of my best friend actually is saying, hey, I'm going up to check out this college. Do you want to come with me for the ride? I'm like, yeah, sure. So I went with him, and it was like a country club. It was like, this is really nice. I'm like, all right, I'll apply. So that was the one and only school I applied to. I got deferred acceptance, meaning that they didn't accept me right away, but they said, if we get desperate, we'll call you. And they got desperate. They called me, and I went. But honestly, if I didn't get accepted to that, I wouldn't have went anywhere. I wouldn't have gone to college. It just didn't matter to me. I was really indifferent about it, but I saw it. It looked nice. And that was my motivation because it looked like a country club. I'm like, oh, I could have some fun here.
Hopefully you did have fun, right?
I did. Yeah. Yeah. It was a good time. I mean, I wasn't the crazy college kid that you see in Animal House, and nothing like that. Again, I was the kid who was in the library using the free computers, doing the graphic design and doing a lot of that stuff, taking advantage of their equipment that they had at the time, which was state of the art, word processors and all this stuff. But it was a lot of fun.
So you said you had siblings, and they're all somewhat entrepreneurial too. Was that just a spark? Was it luck? In along the same, I don't know if you have kids and if they've kind of followed that same path too.
You know, as a psychologist, I could talk about this a little bit, telling you that there almost certainly is a genetic component to it. The whole idea of being an entrepreneur, it entails, as you know, a certain amount of risk, usually like a high amount of risk. You have to be that type of person that can tolerate the ups and downs. And there's some other personality factors associated with it as well. So there is that component. But really, I would think the majority, people always talk about nature versus nurture. And this is probably a lot more nurture than nature, but nature does have a part in it. So I do have two children. My daughter is now 24 years old, and she's doing her own thing. She does not want a job, like a corporate job or anything. She turned down so many different things. She hates it. She always wants to do her own thing, and that's what she's doing. And my son's still finishing up school, but I have a feeling that he'll go in that direction too.
I've always wondered, is it something that you nurture, or is it, for whatever reason, your whole family seems to have this genetic code?
Abnormality, yeah.
What do you think any part of it can be taught, or is it because,
Oh
as
yeah,
you said, entrepreneurship today is much more popular than it ever is. But yet, when I look at it, I just find it absurd that I would pay $200,000 to go to a college to learn how to be an entrepreneur. I'd rather spend 20 grand and blow it and lose it trying to
right.
build a business.
Right. And I was, we talked to my kids about that too. But there's more to college than just like learning about the material itself. Like if you're going to college to be like a doctor or a lawyer or whatever, there's that part. But there's also the experience that you have. It's that time between being a child and being an adult that they call adolescence. That there's a lot of social development there, but things have changed with the internet and like online school as well. And in fact, I did my PhD thesis on the social development of children and adolescents going from high school to the real world via online school and how that's different. And it turns out, at least from my research, that it really isn't different. People develop socially the same way. It doesn't hold them back if you're not there in person. So you have like virtually, I mean, it's a different experience, but you gain the same skills that you would do like at a regular school. So there's, and then there's also just the fun, the experience, the memories. Uh, but I think that if you like my sister and brother didn't go to college, and if you speak to people who didn't go to college, it's not like they don't have memories. They don't have good memories of that time of their lives. They just did different things. So I don't put a lot of weight in there. But if it is a good school, like I wouldn't like Bryant, I always kind of, I don't really talk that up as like such a great school, and I'm glad I went. I do kind of wish I went to more a rounded school, like a liberal arts type of school, where I could better my English communication skills and public speaking and all of the other things, and learn about critical thinking and learn about sciences and arts and like everything, just to be a little bit more well developed. And I think a good school, a good university will kind of nurture that in the student in addition to teaching them that specific subject. So I don't I know it's incredibly expensive, and and I think that people could get for that money they could probably get something very good as an alternative. Uh, but I'm not ready to throw away the whole college education just yet, like that journey.
I struggle with all of this because part of the reason I struggle with it is the cost of college, which is astronomically absurd today. I see pretty much zero return on investment unless you want to be in a certain major and it's a requirement and it comes with a high paying job. And even then, the reality is taking an undergraduate degree online and spending time learning will get you far further ahead and smarter than going to a, let's call it a prestigious college. You talk about critical thinking and English and learning. I know that there are some very good colleges for critical thinking, but they're not what everyone thinks they are. In other words, they're not the ones that you would think are the ones that teach critical thinking. Um, have you actually had experience with colleges who are good at teaching critical thinking?
I would have to say no, but I know because I haven't had a lot of experiences with different colleges where I can make that judgment, if that makes sense.
Yes.
I have experience with the college that I went to and with LaSalle University here in Massachusetts, where I taught for several years, and that's it. And even where I taught at LaSalle, I was I was pretty much the guy for critical thinking because I taught psychology, both introductory psychology and social psychology to like advanced students or older students, but that was kind of limited. I don't know what was going on outside my department, so I can't really answer that fairly, if that makes sense. But
No,
just to get back to what you were saying about the degree and the cost, and yeah, I mean, if you look at this historically, you could see like what colleges were back in the 1960s and the 70s, how much you paid versus how much you got, like as a salary, and the like it's just incredible if you've seen the charts, like how much you're actually paying now versus how much you're actually making it. Like even, and you mentioned like a specialty, like unless you have to go, but even then I don't know of anything, like even if like a doctor, for example, who makes a fortune, they have to pay a fortune. It probably takes like 10 years to get that money back. They have to work as a resident for how many years, 4 or 6 years, which they get paid like nothing. And I mean, it's crazy. But that's why I'm a huge supporter of online university. My son does like part and part. He's at school now, Southern New Hampshire University, and he is but he did it online for a year. He did it in person for like a couple semesters, and he's coming back and he's going to finish up online because he really enjoys it online. It's like a fraction of the cost, and I mean like a fraction of the cost. And he's learning so much more online because he's that type of person. He's the type of person who could structure himself, and he knows like when he's ready to learn, that's when he does his work. And that's one of the great things about online school. You don't have to get up at 8 o'clock, and you don't have to do it from 8 to 9. It's just like your work's done at the end of the week. And for some people that is perfect, and for other people they just can't handle that. They need the kind of structure that in person universities offer. So in general, I'm a fan of the idea of college because education. I mean, how could you not be for education? But the system that we have in place now, as you mentioned, some very good points. It seems very, very broken, and it needs to be changed.
I'm not anti-education. I love education. I constantly want to learn. And what I found, like even in today's world, if I can take courses at Harvard and Yale for free,
I know.
like I can get the education, I can learn more, and I can have conversations that I couldn't have when I was in college, or that you still pretty much, because they're so stuck to their syllabus that they've got to do things according to the way it is. And we're going to talk about AI today, but you think about AI changed everything to the point that if I wanted to learn about AI, I surely wouldn't go to college because I don't
Oh
think
no.
there's a single place. But with the world changing that fast, I find that it's no longer, it just, yeah, there's a whole bunch of people who are stuck holding on to a belief that no longer serves them.
So the whole idea of going to school, for example, to learn about something like AI would be crazy because, as you mentioned, AI is not today what it is today as it was yesterday and the day before. I mean, it's constantly and rapidly changing, and that like nothing like AI. AI is very unique in that category, but even like the internet and e-commerce, schools have always been playing catch up, and by the time you actually write a course, to write a textbook and publish the textbook, I mean, it's completely out of date. And that's one of the main problems. But if you look at like the sciences by nature are very conservative in that, not politically, but conservative in that they don't accept changes until the changes are like extremely well vetted through peers. I mean, that's like the whole scientific process. So if you're going to school to learn about a scientific endeavor, then that's still good because it doesn't change that rapidly. Even though there may be new developments that are constantly changing, those developments aren't accepted into like the core literature until they're extremely well vetted, peer reviewed, and then they'll be put into like the textbooks. So in some with some topics that's important, and in other topics it's like you can't even imagine going to school for something like that.
Well, and so my kids are now out, but when I was looking at them going in, or just some of the things, they had social media marketing. I'm like,
Mm.
I'm not going to college to learn social media marketing because you're so far behind. It's changing every 6 months. There's no way you're going to keep up. My son spent a lot of time in high school in robotics. And we were walking, as part of robotics, we're like, let's go visit colleges. Because part of the robotics program they were part of, you would get credits for visiting and doing these things. And we'd walk in and they're like, look at what we're doing. And we're like, we have a 3D printer. We have this stuff. We do that stuff. It was like, you guys seem like you're behind the curve. And this is going back 6 years. It seems like trying to catch up. Like math hasn't changed, right? Calculus is calculus, yet they make you buy a new book every year. But some of these more things that are constantly iterating, it's about just going out and learning. And I would even challenge medicine today, because by the time a doctor graduates and gets through their residency and everything else, the amount of things that have come out and changed the world aren't even on their radar screen, in the sense of it's not covered.
I'm pretty sure that
it depends.
Medicine doctors are the same way as like a psychologist, where you're required like certain hours of study in order to maintain your license or whatever. I'm a social psychologist. I'm not licensed for anything. I'm more into research. You don't need a license for research. But in terms of like medical practice or therapy or anything, in order to solve that problem and have like 60-year-old therapists who were practicing stuff from the 1960s, they require like a certain amount of study every year to kind of catch up and stay up to date on things. So that problem is pretty well solved for the most part, assuming that they do the work. And
big assumptions. Today's episode is sponsored by Profit Answer Man Podcast. Did you know that most small business owners hate looking at their financials? It's one reason they may struggle with business success. The Profit Answer Man podcast helps them ensure they are profitable and can pay their employees and weather the storms we all have to face. It's built on the Profit First methodology of pay yourself first. The Profit Answer Man podcast is a must listen to for every small business owner and anyone who wants to help them survive and thrive. Check it out on your favorite listening platform. Since we touched on AI, let's kind of shift to that. You've spent a lot of time in using AI in your businesses and so forth. I just love to hear what you're seeing, what you're doing, and kind of where you see that whole area going.
Yeah, I got involved probably in May of this year. And that's because I heard about what OpenAI was doing with their ChatGPT and their DALL-E, like the image generation. So I signed up to get on their platform. I was on their like waiting list of one of, millions or billions, who knows how many people. And my invitation was accepted in May. And once I got on it, I started playing around with it, and I instantly knew that this is paradigm shifting in terms of not just business, but the world. It was the most amazing tool that I've seen since I first got on the internet back in 1994, and I was blown away. So there's definitely parallels there, but I think that this one is even more significant because the internet has its growth and it's always growing and expanding. But artificial intelligence is very different. It's growing at like an exponential pace. So I think it's more exciting and more scary, but definitely it's more interesting. That's for sure. So I am involved in the publishing industry. For the past 12 years, I've been doing self-publishing, running a company, Book Marketing Pro, and I help people publish their books and market their books. So that's what I've been doing. And it's been like nothing much changed in the past 12 years. There's been some technological advancements, and some of the platforms have made things easier. So like little like small steps. But with this, one of the first things I did was I asked ChatGPT to write a book description for the book that I uploaded. And it wrote a description for the book, like a sales description that you would see on Amazon, within 3 seconds. And it was far better than I could have ever done, even after reading the whole book. Like if somebody paid me to write a description on their book. So that's when I knew. I said, all right, we're dealing with something incredible here. That's just one example. But to this day, I have like several different businesses now where we use AI to create books from scratch, like nonfiction books. That's called bookbud.ai. You just come with the idea. You say, you tell it what you want, you walk it through a few steps, it walks you through a few steps. And within like 3 hours, you have a complete book ready to publish. And using AI, we do voice narration as well. And for the first time that I've been following this since 12 years ago with artificial voices, digital voices, they've all been like horrible, like nothing that sounds it sounds like you could listen to it, you could tolerate it if you're like listening to like some kind of article or some kind of academic article or something, but nothing like you'd want to be entertained by a book. So with AI and voice cloning, this is the first time that you can't tell the difference. And that first time when I cloned my own voice, and I made me read like a paragraph of a book, I was completely blown away because I could not tell the difference between my voice and my AI generated voice. That could have been me reading it. It's that perfect. So and again, tip of the iceberg. It's been out for like not even a year, and it's already here at this stage. So just imagine what it's going to be like a year from now, 5 years from now. It's incredible to think about.
So I have to come clean with the audience. We actually get AI generated transcripts out of this recording.
Mm.
The AI generated transcript then gets put into another AI, and we ask it to write the LinkedIn post, the Instagram post, find the best clips, create your best sayings and so forth. It has dramatically shifted the way we do our podcast production today. And not only that, our editor uses AI to enhance your voice, to make you sound better. We're on a new platform now that your voice is coming through and capturing on your end much better than it used to when we used Zoom, because they compressed everything. But all of these different things have started to definitely flow through, and it's just making everything so much easier, faster, better. And I don't know that I played around, but like I do it with my client calls. I take my client calls and I tell AI, how could I do a better job of serving them? How could I do a better job in my sales? How can I improve, or did I miss things? And it's uncanny how good a job it does to help me get better at what I do. And I'm just loving it and excited about how that can all come to be. I mean, it's almost to the point I am wondering if in the not too distant future, we just have AI teachers. And then we could get rid of college, right? I want to learn
Right.
about XYZ. Well, here's the thing. Do you get this? No. Explain that to me in a different way. Oh, you learn this way. From now on, I'm going to talk to you this way, because when I use these types of analogies, they sit with you. It's like people say math is hard, right? But a kid who loves baseball can figure out all the stats. Math's not hard. He just needs to change the language in which he understands it. People learn differently and in different styles. And I think AI is going to be perfect at doing that. Actually, it kind of reminds me of I don't know if you've ever read the book Ready Player One.
Oh my goodness. I've seen the movie. It's one of my favorite movies.
You've got book is, of course, 10x better than the movie. But when you read it, it's literally kind of, I did not think of AI when I read that book because AI wasn't ready, but the whole way they taught in that book was highly immersive. So if you wanted to learn about Rome, you had haptic gloves and in a visor on, and you felt like you were in Rome. You could smell Rome, you could hear Rome, you could see Caesar. Um, and it was like you were there. So it was a much more immersive type of experience. And I think all of this will slowly come to every part of our lives, which means we've got to change, right? Change comes faster and faster. And I know when I grew up, people didn't change fast. But today, if you're not changing, you're becoming obsolete.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, it's part of our nature that we don't like change. We like consistency. I don't think that's going to change much, uh, but we need to. I think that as an individual, you need to embrace where things are going and work with it. And I work with, and I've not just work with, but I am communicating very often with a lot of people who absolutely hate AI and they feel completely and totally threatened by it because it's going to take away their jobs. And I could understand that. I mean, this is the way people felt who were driving buggies, the horse and buggies. And this is the way that people felt in the factories that were manually doing things that were replaced by robots. I mean, this isn't new. It's just another phase where if a machine can do something far better and more efficient than you can do it, don't be mad at the machine. Think, well, maybe it's time I learn a new skill, or how can I use this machine to my advantage? And I know it's not that easy for a lot of people who, especially who did something their entire lives that AI is now kind of replacing them with. But sorry. I mean, it happens. It happened to people for generations, and it's going to happen to you. It's going to happen to me. I mean, a lot of things that I was doing, there's no way I could do it anymore or charge for it. Like I used to charge like $200 or something to write a book description. I can't do that anymore. I took that off my website. I'm offering that for free now because, again, it's money that I'm not making, but I'm using AI to do it for free, generate more business, and sell people the things that AI can't do for now. So that's like just an example. You have to adapt. One of the most vocal um, people that I work with against AI is narrators. Narrators who find themselves quickly being replaced by cloned voices who honestly can do a better job than 95% of the narrators that I work with, that I've ever worked with. They don't complain. They're not late on deadlines. You could, and they don't take months to record a book. It's not their fault. I mean, they're human, but when you put them up against artificial intelligence who could do it just beautifully, then I mean, you have to think, okay, well, maybe I shouldn't. Like right now, I tell my narrators, maybe you should really focus on performative, like fiction, because AI doesn't quite have that down yet. That where it could really like deliver like a Harry Potter reader, like a Harry Potter book with the different voices and capture the essence, like being an actor. Maybe you should focus more on that than like dry narration of a nonfiction book that a computer could do far better than you can. So again, it's just a matter of adapting. It doesn't mean that you have to quit and throw up your hands and say, I can't do anything anymore. You just got to think about it, be creative and think how you can use artificial intelligence to your advantage, how you could use it to make money instead of to be a victim of artificial intelligence.
It's funny, and it kind of goes back to the critical thinking. What I have found is people don't even know how to converse with AI. So going back to the problem you just brought up, you don't have to think about this. Go to AI and say, hey, I'm a voice narrator. This is what I do. You've taken my job. How can I do something different? Well, what about this? Well, this is what I'm seeing. What do you, like? You can literally have a conversation with AI to help you refine and think the way you're doing it. I mean, I'm really excited. One of the big things I'm working on right now is, so I hired a VA to take over all my basic AI stuff. Like before, I really struggled to get a VA to be able to create good show notes, do all these things. I would always get back stuff that I would get very frustrated with. But now I'm like, just do this. And I'm getting stuff back that's reasonable, and we just have to slightly edit it. And the more that the VA and I work on it, the better and better. But now that I've freed up all that time, I can create so much more content for my business to help me directly with clients and to help me do things at a higher level than I can do them today. So I see it as a great way to make me better, faster, quicker. And I'm assuming other people are going to have to do the same thing. It is like, at the end of the day, we don't have any more blacksmiths, right? Somehow we all survived. and for the first time ever, you've got somebody who will help you with it, right? AI will you can have these kind of conversations and say, well, I don't like that answer. Redo it. And within seconds, it's redone. And all the things that I know people don't like to do. What I have found with AI is, I think the biggest struggle, and I know for me, has always been getting from 0 to 1. But if I can get from 1, I can get to 100. And what AI does, it gets me from 0 to 50 or 60. And now going from that, I'm no longer going to 100. I'm going to 300 because it gave me much more than I could ever do with the time I had. And it's allowing me to improve. So I'm looking forward to all these changes and being able to do that. And I think it still comes back to critical questioning and learning how to ask great questions, and then not to take, like, AI sends me stuff back about me. I'm like, you're lying. Like, that's not true. Now AI can't lie. It just made crap up.
Yeah.
And then I have to go in and
Creative.
fix it and do things. But the better the story I can give it, the better it returns to me good, wonderful stuff.
I've heard people say, or I've read somewhere, that one of the most promising careers right now is prompt engineering. It's being able to talk to AI and talk to it efficiently. And from what I've read, companies are paying like kids right out of college over $500 an hour to do this because it's so incredibly valuable if you do know how to communicate with AI. And I think one of the best ways you can learn that is just by doing it and doing it regularly. And it's a feedback loop. If you give it some information and it returns some information that's not quite right, you have to change that and give it, and you learn how to talk to it, and you learn how it responds. And if don't try to buy a book on it again, because it's going to be out of date by the time you actually read it.
But this is what's so awesome about AI. You take what it gives you, you rewrite it, you give it back to the AI and go, hey, I took this, you gave me this, here's what I wanted. Tell me how to tell you to do this. And it will tell you.
The next phase, I don't know if it's the next phase, but an upcoming phase, which I'm incredibly excited about, is the AI that has memory. Like it's there are some like models, like offline models, or you could do like local, but it's not the same. What I'm talking about is, just imagine now if like ChatGPT was your own ChatGPT, and your login, it remembered everything about you, everything you told it. And so maybe there's a privacy concern here or something that people aren't comfortable with yet. I'm not sure, but it's kind of like your own personal robot in a way, where it knows everything about you, it remembers everything about you, it knows your preferences and desires, like everything that you tell it, everything that you share with it, and it learns over time. So it could be like the one of the best, and probably even a perfect virtual assistant in that sense. that you can use, and in so many different ways that you can't do now because ChatGPT has it like a notoriously poor memory, even though it was like significantly better in that last update. But it's still, when I mean, tomorrow when you use it, it's going to forget everything that you talked about the previous day. So
I've seen some models, and they're targeted towards podcasters and some of the top shows, where you can take all your podcast episodes, put it into the model, and a listener could then have a conversation with you via that model. So they would be able to essentially, with, let's say you have 300 episodes, they could ask a question that might have been covered, and they can have that AI conversation essentially with all the information from all your podcasts.
yeah.
So we're getting there little by little. So at the end of the day, this really begs the question then, what does it mean to be a successful human being?
Well, you could ask ChatGPT. See what it
It'll
says.
lie to me. It's
Well,
going to tell me, you know what? If I asked ChatGPT, I would almost think I would get the mainstream answer, not the truth.
yeah, I could see that. So, as somebody who wrote a book on success, in 2004, I wrote a 740-page book called Year to Success. The first chapter I have in the book is, what does success mean to you? Because if you don't know what success means to you, then what are you actually pursuing? How could you know when you get there? So it's a really important step. And I kind of break it down into a few different domains or areas, like financial success, relationship success, educational success. So you have to look at different parts of your life and kind of define them that way. Like, okay, I know that I'll be successful in this area when X happens. And that's different for everybody. Like, I don't want to be a professional basketball player. I never could physically, I'm sure of it. But uh, that's something that I just don't care for. So if I became a professional basketball player, I wouldn't see that as success, where other people, of course, would. So it's very different for everybody, very personal. I just would encourage people to think of the different domains and don't just think about financial success, because that's important, but it's not the most important for everybody. And you could look at so many examples of that, of people who are hugely successful in their fields, rich, famous, and ended up taking their own lives because they were miserable. And that's definitely not success.
That's our tagline. You got rich, now what? Right? Because you
Yeah.
chased the money thinking it was going to fix everything. And you get the money and you realize, holy crap, this isn't it. And then it's figuring it out in all of those subdomains. And as you said, the subdomains are individual to everyone. What is it for you? And I think there are some that are universal subdomains, but even though it's a universal subdomain, it's going to be different. So health is, I'm assuming we all want to be healthy, right? To be able to do what we want. But what I think of as healthy might be different than what you think of as healthy. And I might be willing to do different things than you are. Somebody might take a vegan path, and somebody might take this kind of workout path, or somebody likes X. It's defining what it is for you, and then sitting down and figuring out, what is the end game? Where are you today? And what do you need to do in the in between to get from where you are to where you want to go? And what I've told people is, we're not writing stone tablets. Like every 5 to 10 years, and I'm in the midst of doing this right now. I wrote my plan back in 2016. I knocked everything out. Now I got to rewrite the plan because I got to have new goals. And so you kind of have to go through that and constantly redefine for yourself, what do you want in this next phase of life? Because what we want when we're at my age is not what we wanted when we were in our 20s or 30s or different parts of it. And so it's that constant iterative process. So what was in the rest of the book then, in a nutshell?
They were basically, every day was called Year to Success, with I had 365 days. Each day was an idea for self-improvement, because that's what it was all about. The whole concept of the book is you there's no like secrets to success. There's no like do this, and this, and then you're going to be successful. It's about working on self-improvement, bettering yourself in small ways every day. And then eventually it's going to vastly increase your chances of being successful in pretty much every domain or all domains that you're interested in. So that's the concept of the book.
And that comes back to the power of compounding.
Yeah.
Things constantly compound over time, but you've got to be clear on where you're going. Out of curiosity, so you wrote that book, you said, what, 2004?
2004.
2004. What have you learned since then?
I learned a lot on the scientific end of things. I mentioned before I was a big fan of a lot of the gurus. And in 2004, when I wrote that book, I was still kind of in that motivational, rah-rah guru type of phase. And it wasn't until like after I sold my first business of significant value when I kind of revisited that material and realized, this really isn't 100% accurate. And then, especially after I got my degree in like I became a social scientist, I started to analyze things a little bit more critically and also draw parallels from psychology. A lot of these motivational gurus are kind of like pseudo psychologists, meaning that they take these psychological concepts, which are true and reliable, but they twist them and manipulate them to be more palatable, yet they're not as effective because they're essentially lying a little bit to make them a little bit more attractive. Because the reality of life is it's hard and you got to work and things don't always work your way. So the fact that just because you want something bad enough doesn't mean you're going to get it. But there are like solid principles about really desiring something and having your thoughts, your conscious and subconscious thoughts, move you in that direction. So there's validity to that, scientific validity, but it's not the secret. It's not the law of attraction that the gurus are trying to sell you. So what I learned is to clean up those principles, and I did in a later edition of the book. I kind of rewritten a lot of things to make them a little bit more scientifically sound and more palatable to me as a social scientist.
I think at the end of the day, it's clearly defining what you want, being sure it's what you want and not something that somebody else wanted that you somehow adapted into your world.
Right.
And then showing up and doing the work day after day to move you in that direction. And then understanding one day you might just decide, hey, I want to go a different direction, and that's okay too. Just go do it and take the time and figure it out and take those next steps. It's time to learn the secrets of life. What's your secret to living an abundant life?
Sleeping 5 hours a night.
5? That's not enough, is it? I like to shoot for 8.
I say 5 hours, but I probably get about 6 hours of solid sleep a day. When I do sleep on the low end, like 5 hours, I definitely take like a nap during the day, like power nap, and I feel completely refreshed and fantastic. And a lot of times when I watch movies at night, I fall asleep and I end up like sleeping in 45 minutes while watching the movie. So I'd get a good 6 hours a day. But that extra 2 hours is just so valuable for me, especially early in the morning. I'm an early morning person. So getting up at 4 a.m. and working like 4 to 6, I knock off tons of stuff. Incredibly productive, which helps me be more abundant.
And I find for me, the early morning is when I get a lot of stuff done. There's no noise. There's no, my mind is fresh. It hasn't, and so you're able to crank through quite a bit. I just get to bed earlier. What did you learn later in life that you wish you would have learned sooner?
I think confidence is the big one. self-confidence. I wish I had this level of self-confidence going through school. I was a high school student back in the 80s, and bullying was very common back then. It was a cool thing to do. And I was often a victim of bullying, like not out of the ordinary. I wasn't like your traditional nerd or anything back then, but I was just like, I was not very confident, self-assured, and relating to other people, like with relationships and girls and friends. I was more of a more secluded than I would want to be looking back. I wish I had more engagement with other people and more relationships. I wish I had that confidence. So I try to instill that on my children too. Try to tell them like the lessons that I learned. Like just be more confident.
The entrepreneurial path is quite different. and the traits is funny. I had an aha moment recently where I had a conversation with someone kind of on this subject of what is it that drives confidence, especially in kids. And the surprising answer is if kids are put into a situation where they have to tell adults what to do, it actually drives and they get results from it. It actually creates a tremendous amount of self-confidence. And I don't know how true that is from a psychological standpoint, but I think it gives them agency to realize, holy crap, I can do things. And maybe it builds it that way. I'm not sure what the principles are behind it. It was kind of an interesting conversation. If you were to give an 18-year-old one specific piece of wisdom, what would it be?
Well, besides being more confident, it would be talk about flexibility. At least that's what's on my mind right now. I would tell them about the importance of being flexible in your ideas and what you want to do, and kind of be open to new opportunities. That's really important, rather than fixated on a certain goal. Because life is strange, and sometimes things happen that aren't good. Sometimes things happen that are very good, and and you got to be in the right position to capitalize on that. And that's where I was in 1994 when I was just kind of like running a little graphic design company. Somebody told me, "Hey, Bo, did you hear about this thing called the internet?" I'm like, "Oh no, what is that?" And they told me about it. I'm like, "Oh, I should check that out." And my life changed from that point.
And congratulations on taking action so early into the game because you were way ahead of everybody else, years ahead of, and that gave you a massive head start.
Yeah, thanks.
If people would like to learn more about you, find your books, your websites, what's the best way for them to do that?
Sure, they can find all my books at bobennett.com, BOBENNETT.com, and all of the businesses that I run, including bookbud.ai, Author Voices, artificial intelligence that I was talking about with publishing. You could find all those websites at my business website, archieboy.com, ARCHIEBOY.com.
And thank you. And we'll put those in the show notes. Thank you so much for joining us.
Okay, thank you.
Once again, we beg the question. Do you have a life plan and clarity on what you want and what you need to get there? Or are you chasing someone else's dream? As you look at this and evaluate the different areas that we talk about, finances, relationships, purpose, your spirituality, and so much more, define what it is that's your version of success. Here's the cool thing. We talked about AI. AI can help you with this and so much more. How do you get ahead of the curve and use it to help propel you forward? It's a super amazing tool for the way I get my work done. Can I ask a favor? I would really appreciate if you'd share this episode with those you think might enjoy hearing Bo's story or could just use a little help in figuring out their own life plan and letting go of society's. Next week, we've got Steve Sims, who's going to talk about making the amazing happen in his book, Go for Stupid. The Art of Achieving Ridiculous Goals. I know you're going to love it. Thanks for listening. Have an abundant week.